Let us have a little fun and talk about Hero color pencils. I received these a little while back. I'm just now getting to them. When I first received these, I didn't know if the pencil was called MU Hero or Mu Hero or Mahiro. I had no idea. I'd never heard of this set. I have since looked into it. The MU stands for Mobile Union, so the pencils themselves are called Hero. And every time I looked these up, all I saw was, for the most part, was their watercolor pencils. And when I did find these, it said this was a limited edition. So I wondered if it was limited because everything I'm seeing on them is watercolor pencils. And here's something interesting. On the package itself, the very first line on the side is, "I began my love for watercolor pencils doing adult coloring books." So I thought, okay, well, maybe these are watercolor pencils, but they're also labeled as oil-based, which, water and oil, that whole thing. So I was confused. I was hoping these weren't watercolor pencils, but I was dying to jump into them and find out. Now, when I first opened these up, the first thing I noticed is it was one giant set of color pencils, like all grouped together in this one plastic set. Now, in between each of these little cases, it was perforated. So, they intended for you to rip them apart. So now that they're separated, you could see it's not the most stable case. It's a little rickety. So I've got all of mine separated. This is the order in which they came. I've got to point out that if this is a pencil set that I would intend to keep going back to, or that you'd go back to, this is not the ideal case for these pencils to live. Let me show you one of these cases here. Like, once you open it, so one side is smooth and the other side has the ridges to contain your pencils. So if you open them up this way, they're just kind of roll around. So you've got to open them ridge side down. The case itself, this is not practical. It wants to constantly shut on you, and it bows when you open it all the way. And every single one of these cases do this. It kind of bows on you. And when you pull a pencil up, usually the other ones kind of fall into its place. So, like, once I get these in numerical order, the odds are I'm gonna probably put these in a zip-up case because I will indeed be using these again. Let's talk about the pencil itself. Now, what I have found, you see the name on the side, Guanji or Guangu, or whatever this is, however it's pronounced. Nowhere on this pencil does it say Hero. The reason for this, from the little bit of research I did, is this brand kind of lends itself out so anybody can come along and say, you know what, I want these Guanji pencils to be Hero pencils, so I buy them, put my packaging, but it's still their pencil. And so there is larger sets. I think it goes up to like 168 maybe. But the pencils themselves will always be labeled the same. It's a beautiful pencil. It has the silver inlay, which usually it's gold, so the silver is a nice change. The very top has the number, and then there is no label as far as the color of the pencil. So it's not like peacock blue or anything. You just have the word color pencil, the logo, and then 79. This is fine by me. Number one, the number is very high up. It'll be the last thing to go, so I love that. And number two, I never say, you know what, let me find the peacock blue. I personally say, let me find number 79. So this is fine by me. It has a nice a glaze on top of the paint. The top is open so you can see if the tips are or are not centered. And to be transparent, I would say about 40% of these pencils are not centered. They're not centered so much that it really affected things, but it definitely, like, you could even see this one right here, how the wood comes up higher on one side and lower on the other. Some of them come up, the wood comes almost to the tip. I didn't have any of them that the lead was so off-centered that the wood came all the way to the tip, but I did have a couple that came pretty high and I had to get a knife to shave it off. But I think that might be my only complaint for these pencils. When I first started swatching them, the very first thing I noticed is these, they have a fantastic for an oil pencil, a fantastic waxy feel to them, in that there was little to no crumbling at all when swatching these. You know, a lot of times, especially when I zoom in on the close-ups during these swatches, you see the little pigments kind of pop off to the side as I put pressure on these. There was next to none on these. These pencils maintained their shape really, really well. Let's look at the actual swatch sheet itself. The colors that this 120 set offer is beautiful. Some gorgeous yellows into the browns. The purple section is not huge. It has a nice purple section. It has enough that I could eat it, and it kind of spreads out into your mauve and your pinks, which is a nice touch. A big range of blues to teal to green. It has a decent section of gray. It has a beautiful, beautiful color palette. For the price that these run for, I was not expecting a whole bunch. This set was an eye-opener. This was a nice surprise. When I actually went to use these pencils, I decided to go with a brown paper. This is unusual. Usually when I try a pencil out for the first time, I go for something more tooth, like a color pencil paper. But I just wanted to try these. These had such a pretty color set. I wanted to go ahead and see how vivid those were, how much they would pop on brown paper. And I gotta say, these pencils did not disappoint. They went down really smooth and instantly vibrant, instantly bright. They layered pretty well. I think the handicap, this was kind of on me because the paper I used had little to no tooth. It did make it a little difficult for me to layer these pencils, but I don't want to hold that against the lead. I think that's honestly, that's just the paper I chose. But even then, I did get some good layers on there. After about 2 or 3, it kind of started getting weak from when I could put more layers, but they blended really well, and like I say, they layered really good. And I was just having a blast using these. Because it did offer such a good range with that blue, and I really wanted to see how far I could push those purples, I went ahead and used that color palette to play around with these pencils. And again, I gotta say, if these surprise me, if you get a chance and you wanna go out and try some of these, they weren't the easiest things for me to find. I'm sure you'll have better luck finding them again than what I had. But if you want to give these pencils a chance, I would highly recommend them. I got very little negative to say about these, other than the case. I definitely think it's a 2 thumbs up recommendation.
Sugar Solito.